Hello, everyone. My name is Aisha Langford, and I'm the founder of Funeral Syllabus, where our motto is make a plan, keep the peace, leave a legacy. Today, I'll be talking about long-term care insurance with Sarae Kasai, a consumer specialist with LTC Consumer. LTC Consumer is a resource for long-term care planning, and they have a variety of options if you're interested in pursuing more. Thank you for joining me, Sarae, and we'll just jump right into the questions. So for people who've never heard of this, what is long-term care insurance and how does it work?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and I'm very excited. Anytime I have the opportunity to talk about long term care insurance, I always jump at it, as strange as that might sound, right? Long term care insurance is a passion for me just simply on the basis that I had a personal experience kind of similar to you going through this with loved ones. And I realized that many people, like my family, were uneducated on what long-term care insurance is and why a family would need it to protect them. And so that, brings us back to your question there of what is long-term care insurance and how does it work? So, long term care insurance in itself is insurance that gives you funds to pay for any type of extended care event that may transpire in your lifetime. So, this could be things like accident, illness, cancer, stroke, effects of aging, Alzheimer's, dementia, any type of cognitive related illnesses. The premise is that you've reached a threshold where you can no longer care for yourself. Okay. And so you buy the long term care insurance to give you funds to pay for care that you may need to sustain, whether it be in your home, assisted living situations, skilled nursing facilities, and so forth.
Okay. And I think a lot of people don't think about it until they actually need it. But can you give us a general idea of how much long-term care options could potentially cost per month?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. You kind of don't think about it until it's too late. When we look at the national average, so kind of across the board, there are three different styles of care that one might need. So you can think of in-home care, assisted living care, and then skilled care. In-home care can vary from home health care aid, chore services, full-time nursing. The average cost for that on a full-time basis currently is about $6,000 a month.
Wow.
Okay. Assisted living facilities are about 5,300 a month, which for me as a specialist in the industry is a trend that I continue to see. And the reason being is more people just simply want to age in place. So that's a terminology that we use quite often. And effectively, it's just kind of depicting that people want to be in the comfort of their home and they're willing to pay a little bit more to have that. And kind of through the pandemic as well, we saw some of the flaws in assisted living care, which also bumped up in home care being a bit more expensive. I
Okay.
think it will continue to trend that way, where in home care becomes the more expensive style of care because it's the more sought after style of care. Um, and then the last category is skilled care. So, skilled care is going to be your skilled nursing homes, acute rehab facilities. So, if someone does have a stroke, they're hospitalized. A lot of times they have to recover in a facility. Those are quite expensive. So, the average of that is 8,500 a month. That is kind of like the threshold in my professional opinion that I've ever seen. These can get all the way up to 10 to 15 grand a month quite
Wow.
easily.
Okay. And then if someone has a long-term care insurance policy, can they just use it whenever they want to, or are there certain criteria that need to be met first before that plan can be utilized?
Yeah, great question. So if you're a long-term care policy holder, you've gone through the process, you have one and you need to utilize the coverage, this is in layman's terms filing a claim, right? Just with auto insurance, we need to file a claim because we had an accident. With long-term care insurance, there are really two ways that someone can become eligible to use their policy. So the first one, which is probably the easiest to understand, is cognitive impairments. That's looking at things like Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. in today's environment, they use the terms mild cognitive impairment kind of loosely. So that can be considered as well. Again, any type of formal diagnosis of a cognitive impairment. The other way is what we refer to as the ADLs. Okay, this is the activities of daily living. You have eating, bathing, toileting, transferring, continence, and dressing. So, what needs to happen is the doctor has to say that you need help with at least two of those in order then use your policy. Okay, so
Okay.
we've got the cognitive and the ADLs, keeping in mind that in either scenario, the need for care is expected to last greater than 90 days. Okay, so
Okay.
it's not going to fall into a category of someone who had a hip replacement and is just simply recovering during that period of time. It's going to be something that's more of a prolonged need.
Okay. And you mentioned as one of the activities of daily living transferring. So
Mhm.
for people who have never heard that term before, what does transferring generally mean?
Generally, it means needing assistance getting to and from, one location into another, or out of bed into a wheelchair, out of a chair into a different chair. Quite literally, it is transferring, whether it be from your wheelchair into a vehicle or
Okay.
many different scenarios.
Okay. And in your opinion and professional expertise, what are some of the advantages of having long-term care insurance?
There are a lot. There are a lot of advantages. I think that many people don't consider, is the protection of your family. First and foremost, as you and I can both kind of iterate, having gone through need for care within a family where you have to be the decision maker, the care provider, it is physically and emotionally draining. Okay, so protecting your family and your loved ones is by far the most important. Financial protection. So, I mean, that goes without saying. When we have a need for care, and the current cost of care in 2024 is 6 to 8 grand, the cost of care is only going to simply increase. And so, if you're an individual, with a nest egg, you may have resources to be able to cover it, but are you going to want to spend down everything that you worked hard for to be able to pay for this care? Most commonly, the answer is no, right? Even if we don't have a nest egg, we're not wanting to spend down funds that we currently have. Okay. So we're buying the insurance to offset that risk so that we have protection, peace of mind financially. We're not having to scramble at the last minute to figure out, how to pay for this. Okay. You get freedom, right? Anytime you have private insurance, you have ability to pick and choose how you want to receive care. So whether it be staying at home and paying a higher, price to be at home and be comfortable, that is the freedom that private insurance, long-term care insurance will give you. And then, some of the other things that individuals would note is that you've got tax advantages. Okay. So individuals will have the ability to deduct a portion of premiums that are paid for long-term care insurance. Depending on age brackets and finances and things like that. So that's a little bit more mundane, but just know that there are tax advantages to having long term care insurance. None of the benefits are ever taxed, meaning if you were ever on claim and the benefit is plain, you're not going to be taxed on that as income. And then there are, state advantages. So every state is going to be a little bit different. But for example, New York, they give tax credits for being privately insured. Other states have partnership plans, which we'll talk about here in terms of other insurance options. You're going to find that as the years go on, they're creating more and more advantages for private long-term care insurance because they want more people to solve for this problem. Medicare, Medicaid systems will be bankrupt very soon, right? And so they can no longer provide coverage for these services. So some things that they're talking about are allowing for you to do, 401k deductions to pay for long-term care insurance and so forth. So again, I think just as the years progress, the need for care continues to be shed in the media and within the federal government, we're going to find more advantages that way as well.
Okay. And a lot of people will say, well, my health insurance will cover me. I'm all good. Or I have disability insurance. And between health insurance and disability insurance, those things are already there to help people with their long-term care needs. So what's the difference?
Yeah, that is, I mean, such a misconception out there. Unfortunately, health insurance just is not structured to cover any type of extended care, right? So with health insurance, it's kind of major medical. So you're thinking of all of the things, your doctor's visits, your prescriptions, rehabilitation services, surgeries, the more common major medical. But when it comes to anything that is extended, like we've talked about, where someone may need in home care for an extended period of time, health insurance is not going to cover any of that. They may cover rehabilitation services, so they may cover occupational therapy, speech therapy, but they're not going to cover a home health care aide to come into your home. Really, the only time that that falls into health insurance is if it's hospice care, okay, which is essentially end of life care. Okay.
Okay.
If we're 65 and over and we have Medicare, that's pretty much the same thing. Medicare is our retirement health insurance. And so, same thing, they're not covering these services. Medicare will have all of these different supplements that you can add on for prescriptions and basically to just bump up the value of your insurance. But at the end of the day, none of those are structured to cover extended care. So again, really all we have is hospice care, rehabilitation care, and slight coverage in a skilled care situation. Okay, so they would cover you up to 100 days in skilled care if you've been hospitalized and transitioned directly into skilled care. So think of a stroke where you're hospitalized, you go directly into that acute rehab. In that instance, Medicare will pick up the first 100 days. Aside
Okay.
from that, you're on your own. Um,
Okay. And what about disability insurance? Is that similar or absolutely different from long-term care insurance?
it's absolutely different. Disability insurance, most of us just carry during our working years. If you're somebody who carries it as an individual after your working years, good for you. But most commonly, you're not going to have even disability once you have a long-term care event, just because of the age, the time frame of needing it. At the end of the day, disability is covering the loss of our income, right? So if something
Okay.
were to happen, most commonly it's going to cover a percentage of your expected income. So 60% is pretty common. So we would expect, let's say we're making $100,000 a year, we're on disability, we would then expect to be paid $60,000, and not have to be working because we're on disability.
Got it.
So we can pay our bills, but we still can't pay for the nurse that needs to come in and help us every single day because, again, our health insurance wouldn't be covering that.
Okay. And is there an ideal age range to start considering getting a long-term care insurance policy? And then I guess on the other end, if someone's listening to this or watching this and they're 85 years old and said, oh my goodness, I need to get a long-term care insurance policy, is there an age cutoff?
Yeah, great question. So, age cutoff, final rule is usually about 80, with the exception that there are some different styles of plans that you can get, up to the age of 85. But 75 is going to be your cutoff for most plans.
Okay.
The challenge about answering this question directly is there's so many different types of plans.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the most common types of plans, 75 is your cutoff, but then there's that category where, okay, we could find you a plan if you're over 80. But if you're over 85, usually it's going to be pretty hard to find you something.
Okay.
Uh, Ideal buyer age. So, and this is just my professional opinion, having worked in the industry and seen the rates and the plan options. I think mid 40s into early 50s is where you can secure coverage for a reasonable premium. But keep in mind, the younger you are, the better. Okay. These are all factored by age, health, relationship status, finances. So when we look at plans at a younger age, you're getting lower rates, you're locking in that lower rate. And you're allowing for the insurance to hold its value for you, right?
Okay.
And hopefully, when you're younger, you're healthier and you have advantages, lower premiums essentially, because you're in a better health category.
Okay. And then in closing, people may be listening to or watching this podcast from different parts of the United States. So I'm personally in Michigan right now, and you're out on the West Coast. But if someone's in Iowa or New York or somewhere else in the United States, how can they find a long-term care insurance provider in their area?
Well, my organization, LTC Consumer, we're nationally based, and we're one of the top kind of online resources for long-term care planning. So certainly you could come to our website to become educated and get in contact with someone within my team. I'll also provide as a follow-up, my phone number and email if anyone wants to speak with me directly. The biggest point to reiterate is that because these are health qualified, age rated, based upon your own personal circumstances, you absolutely want to speak with a specialist in regard to the long term care insurance. It's not something that, unfortunately, like other types of insurance, we can go online, plug in a few things, and generate quotes and then point, click, buy. I know in today's world, that is what everybody wants, is to be able
Right.
to do it by themselves, point, click, buy, and not have to deal with the speaking to a representative and setting up meetings. And um, listen, I wish it could be that simple, but this is not something that we want to make that simple without giving somebody the education on the forefront, right? Of, hey, this is what you can get, this is how it works, and answering questions, because you don't want to make a mistake when it comes to this type of insurance. You don't want to be 20 years down the road and need to file a claim and not understand the policy or not have the policy pay what you need it to.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. And those were my big overview questions, but is there anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up? And if not, that's okay too.
Yeah, I think probably just the main thing when I think about what I do on a day-to-day basis of educating individuals is just kind of the basics of the policies, understanding that there's three critical components to it. You end up picking a policy value, which is referred to as a pool of money. You pick a monthly or a daily benefit, which is essentially how much money that insurance pays on a daily or a monthly basis if you have a need for care. And then lastly, you pick what's called an elimination period. So the elimination period is kind of thought of as like a deductible, in that when that doctor says, yes, you have a need for care, that elimination period is the period of time you wait before that insurance pays for your care.
Okay.
So those are just kind of the most critical things to note about the structure of the insurance. Of as a buyer, potentially interested, I want to look at this. What am I thinking about? Those are the three things to think about. How much insurance value do I want? Which again is the pool of money. I usually will recommend, based upon an individual's family history and financial circumstances, a pool of money as a starting point. So keep that in mind. If you're out there and you're thinking about long-term care insurance, that pool of money, total amount of insurance, usually kind of coincides with your circumstances, financially, family history, your current health. Obviously, the cost of care is highly important as well. And then that daily or monthly benefit, again, that's just what it's paying you once you have a need for care. And then the waiting period. So those are super important when you come into a conversation wanting to learn about long-term care insurance. And then, of course, just like any other type of insurance, there's bells and whistles and all of that I could explain to someone who is interested. But I think as long as you fairly understand those three components, you have a good grasp on what you're looking for and what's important for you if you dive into the conversation. And listen, I think this is very important, just because, like I said, I had a personal experience of a grandmother on Medicaid and an uncle in his 40s who lost his mobility from the waist down. So I've seen both ends of the spectrum, and in no way is it ever easy. And something like this just makes it easier, right, for the family. It takes off the burden and it gives you a plan. It gives you something to plan for. And it's not an easy conversation. People don't like talking about this, frankly, right? Nobody likes to see themselves in an impaired state. And so I totally understand that aspect of it. And I think that's why what you're doing is so fantastic, of just helping people be educated on all of these key components that you yourself had to do.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And so I will say, in full disclosure, I actually got my policy from Sarae and her team, but I don't get any stocks or bonds or, extra pencils or steak dinners. But it was a very interesting and helpful process to go through and answer the questions. And when I initially reached out to you, that was actually before I was married. And so I was getting information, and then I got married. And so we actually have a joint policy, and there are options for couples or spouses. Also, if that's of interest. So there's different opportunities, but it was helpful to just go through and think about those things. And I agree with you. No one really wants to talk about end of life or getting sick or these issues that can make us sad. But I think we probably have all had a situation where we've had a friend or a family member or loved one that maybe needed care, or a neighbor, and, finances were an issue. And this won't solve all of your problems, but maybe for some people or some families, it may give them a little bit peace of mind that if they ever do have a need, they will have a little bit more control and a little bit more options, where they're not, bleeding all of their resources or having to make different decisions because they just financially can't swing it. So I appreciate your time and the services that you and other professionals have, really to help educate the community. And even if people choose not to pursue long-term care insurance, at least they know a little bit more about it and know that it's an option to potentially pursue down the road if they do ever become interested. So thank you so much for your time and your talent and your expertise. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And you nailed it on the head. Even if you don't buy, it's important just to become educated.